Attack on Titan is the best anime ever created. And if you think otherwise, we might gotta throw hands, respectfully. I've been a pretty big fan of anime since I was in elementary school. I remember spending every Saturday morning watching Pokemon, Zoids, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh! I collected the cards, built model kits. Zoids model kits are super slept on, by the way. And Toonami was a giant influence on my childhood as well. It put me on Dragon Ball Z and also heavier, more politically charged animes like Gundam Wing, where crash out child soldiers piloted weapons of mass destruction, destroying everything in their path for peace.
The more you fight, the more sacrifice for peace becomes a waste. You must have realized that.
When really, they're being manipulated by adults for political gain. Why I love that shit at 7, 8 years old, I don't know. But animes like that were a gateway into me eventually coming across Attack on Titan, which was a recommendation from a friend I had back in college. I wasn't familiar with it, wasn't reading manga at that point in my life either, so I went into it completely blind. And it didn't take me long before I started to realize I was watching probably one of the best written stories ever. I'm talking up there with Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, Snowfall, in that realm of writing, even though it's an anime, and I'll die on that hill. But what initially had me hooked on it was the sheer shock factor of it all. Seeing giant buck-naked titans eating humans was a train wreck you didn't want to see, but you couldn't stop watching. Once you get past the shock factor of it all, the story starts to introduce you to the politics and the figureheads controlling the plot. You start to realize there's a lot more to this story than just Titans and what we see on the surface. Now, there's a lot we can talk about when it comes to what this anime seeks to convey. It's being compared to Nazi Germany with ethnic cleansing and nationalism, to Imperial Japan, to ancient Rome, Imperial Britain. It has model minority concepts in it and a little sprinkle of religion. People have broken this anime down so many different ways, trying to figure out all of the intricate details. You could spend months on end going down rabbit holes about everything being portrayed in this anime. It's a giant puzzle and a masterpiece. And even though it touches on all of these themes, what sticks out the most to me is that it's a story revolving around oppression and what it does to people, and also how it affects the people doing the oppressing. In a nutshell, it's about human behavior and how oppression can reshape society. To understand why I think this is a story about oppression, you need to understand the world these characters are born into, starting with 2 places. First, we have Marley. You can think of Marley as an imperial state and military superpower. And second, we have Paradis Island. Paradis is surrounded by walls under the control of the Fritz or Reese royal family. So, imagine you wake up tomorrow and find out that everything you know about your country was a lie. That's essentially what happened to the people of Paradis Island. The people inside these walls believe they're the last humans alive, and they're not. Their history was taken from them. Their memory was erased by King Karl Fritz, who created Paradis and the walls after he left the Eldian Empire when it collapsed on the mainland and Marley rose to power. And to keep it short, Karl Fritz believed that the Eldian Empire deserved to end because of the suffering the Empire caused with Titan power over centuries, starting with Ymir, who was an indentured servant and concubine to King Fritz.
You have helped the tribe of Eldia to become both large and powerful for the crown. For all this, I shall reward you with my seed.
Who was the OG that built the ancient Eldian Empire, brick by brick, body by body. So because of them being brainwashed and lied to for over a century about who they really are, these people believe that Titans are these rogue beasts that randomly pose a threat to their society. Just a heads up, I'm leaving out a lot of details just in case you want to go back and watch it for yourself in your free time. Okay, if you haven't put 2 and 2 together, the people inside the walls of Paradis are called the Eldians, and the people of Marley are called Marleyans. And Marleyans do not like Eldians at all. And the propaganda they've been fed portrays the Eldians as devils and a demon race whose blood inherently makes them evil or dangerous, or both. Marleyans teach every generation that Eldians are a threat to humanity. And even the Eldians that live there are taught that because they have Eldian blood, that makes them dangerous, regardless of what they've actually done, which is nothing but being born.
What did my mom do to make these people hate her?
For thousands of years,
Your kind brutalized and slaughtered people all over the world!
And this is where we can see parallels between the anime and real life, because how many times throughout history have groups of people been judged based solely off of who they were? This reflects a system that uses propaganda, bloodline-based identity, segregation, and many more cruel things to dehumanize a group of people for being born on what the system perceives as the wrong side of the aisle, just existing, and people from out of nowhere saying, I don't like you, and they don't even know you, nor do they want to get to know you. They only know the version of you they've been taught to be afraid of. Oppressive systems have to convince ordinary people that another group is fundamentally different or fundamentally dangerous. It gives those in power a problem to point to, and it gives the people within the system a reason to be afraid or frustrated. And once a society latches onto that story, it gets way easier to justify discrimination. And in my opinion, the most powerful way to convince an entire society of something is to use propaganda or to use a story. And Attack on Titan really drives this point home when you're introduced to Gabi. Gabi's an Eldian Titan Shifter candidate fighting on behalf of Marley, and her entire worldview is built on Marley's indoctrination. She sees herself as a devil because she's Eldian and thinks the only way to prove herself and save her family is by eradicating everybody on Paradis Island. That's the only way she can prove that she's one of the good ones. And she really believes she's doing the right thing. She's responding to a story that's been pushed to her since she was old enough to understand the world around her. And she's only 12. But if she was born on Paradis Island, would she believe any of this? Probably not. She'd know nothing of the outside world anyway, and she'd still have propaganda to deal with there. Another manufactured story. And I think this is one of the biggest questions Attack on Titan has us think about throughout the story. How much of what we really believe is actually ours, and how much of it is a result of what's been pushed to us? You'd be hard-pressed to find a person that hasn't been indoctrinated by anything at some point in their life, whether it be religion, a political affiliation, or some form of group think. That's something that affects you and is likely to change as you willingly become more educated and gain more life experience. Or you might spend your entire life believing something until reality forces you to confront those beliefs, which is what eventually happens to Gabi after she actually meets the people she was raised to hate.
There were never any devils on this island. Just people. People like us.
So here we have propaganda in full effect. The system created an enemy and has successfully convinced an entire group of people that another group of people deserves to be hated. And this makes it easier to commit atrocities because who cares? They're not human anyway. It's like killing flies, getting rid of pests. They deserve it anyway. Why not attack Paradis? Which is exactly what happened, and is for me the most memorable moment in the series because all hell breaks loose. Marley uses Titan Shifters to breach one of the outer walls of Paradis Island to recover the Founding Titan, get access to Paradis' resources, maintain military superiority as Titan power becomes less dominant, and to preserve its position as a global superpower. This is also where we see Eren as a child, who is the main character, watch his mother get eaten by a Titan, exactly like he planned. And you'll figure that out if you watch the anime. It'll make sense, I promise. But this puts Eren on the path of revenge, where later on down the line, he ends up attacking Marley. During that attack, Gabi's friends die, and that fuels her path for revenge. It's this sick cycle of life where nobody is actually right, and everybody's just responding to trauma. It's an eye for an eye. There's no heroes here. So, within all of this chaos, at what point does the victim become the oppressor? And this is where we can look at Eren as an example. He starts out as this innocent kid who watches his world get turned upside down, to becoming a liberator who wants to free the Eldians, which leads him to becoming a nationalist icon, which also leads to him becoming a mass murderer. So from Eren's point of view, he's willing to be this martyr for freedom, even if that means everyone else outside of the walls has to go.
The Titans of the Walls will continue their march until every trace of life beyond our shores is trampled flat, and the people of Paradis are all that remains of humanity.
That's his focal point, his drive. But what's dope about how the story was written is freedom has a different meaning for each of the characters. When you look at Armin, Eren's best friend, his idea of freedom is curiosity and the capability to explore the unknown. His value system is different. He's way more empathetic and values communication. Then you have Mikasa, Eren's love interest and adopted sibling. Kind of a long story. Just take it all for what it is right now. Freedom is love in her eyes. Zeke, who's related to Aaron, believes that freedom is being free from suffering, and he wants to end the suffering of his people, the Eldians, by euthanizing them, which would end the cycle of persecution in his eyes. We can even go as far back as Karl Fritz. His idea of freedom was being a pacifist and isolating his people from imperial violence, sacrificing freedom of choice for peace, erasing the Eldians' memories without their consent. Almost every single character in this story thinks they're fighting for freedom. And these ideas of freedom almost always come at someone else's expense because of this world shaped by fear and trauma. And I say almost because you have characters like Kenny Ackerman, who has arguably one of the best quotes in the entire story.
All of us had to spend our lives drunk on something, else we'd have no cause to keep pushing on. Everyone was a slave to something.
Everybody had to be drunk on something to keep pushing on, which means everybody is a slave to something. So are you truly free? And this is why freedom seems so hard to define here, because every character thinks they're free when really they're being driven by something they can't let go of. Attack on Titan also finds a way to redefine identity because nobody knows who they actually are, which I guess makes sense considering how old some of these characters are, but everyone is trying to find themselves in a world trying to tell them who they're supposed to be, which plays into the hands of oppressive systems, because not only can they control what people do, they also control who people believe they are. We can use Gabi as an example again. She thought she was one of the good Eldians. Her identity was shaped around being a subservient tool to Marley until she found out that these people who she considered devils are just normal people. Reiner's a great example as well. He's also an Eldian that grew up in Marley's internment zone. He's a super complex character who grew up thinking he was going to be this hero, when in reality, he spent years murdering people who are just like him. He's a child soldier, a propaganda victim, a mass murderer, and eventually he becomes a man so crushed by the guilt of what he's done that he just wants to end his own life. He wants inner peace because he's just tired of it all. Reiner's a clear example of internalized oppression. He's what happens when a system succeeds in brainwashing a child into thinking violence is justice. And you'll notice with these Eldians that grew up in Marley internment zones, they just want validation. That's why they're recruited to become Titan shifters. They think that if they prove themselves enough, they'll be treated like actual human beings. Every major character in this story is shaped by the system and eventually becomes someone who enforces said system. Victims turn into soldiers, soldiers turn into oppressors, and oppressors create new victims, and the cycle continues. So with everyone trapped in this cycle, how can it be broken? Attack on Titan does show us how this could be possible with Sasha's father, Mr. Browse.
I reckon Sasha died as she wandered in that forest for too long. We gotta get the children out of that forest.
Children should be kept out of the forest. A very strong message. And by forest, he's referring to war, revenge, inherited hatred, propaganda, and carrying the grudges of adults. A place you can get lost in. It's a really powerful metaphor that encapsulates the Attack on Titan world. Children shouldn't have to inherit the conflict started by adults that in most cases won't even live to see the consequences of the conflicts they start. They just pass everything on to the next generation and kick the can down the road. That's exactly what we see happen to Gabi, Reiner, and the other internment Eldians involved. They inherited Marley's hatred of Eldians in Paradis, and then you have Eren, who's from Paradis, who inherited hatred watching his mom getting eaten by Titans. A lot of these characters are born into this cycle and just become villains that never made it out of the forest. They lost themselves. But someone has to choose to stop passing the cycle on, and that's the point Mr. Browse was trying to make. Within all of this chaos, death, and destruction, we do have characters that eventually choose to stop letting the suffering define every decision they make, because revenge just isn't going to cut it anymore. I kind of hinted at this earlier in the video, but Gabi had a drastic change in how she viewed the people in Paradis Island when she was captured and briefly held as a prisoner by the Survey Corps. Once she integrated into Paradis society, she was forced to confront her prejudice about those people, the people she viewed as devils. She realized they were kind and normal. which had her questioning everything Marley had taught her. Falco, who's Gabi's best friend, never fully bought into the propaganda and spent a lot of the time questioning if all the violence was actually necessary or solved anything. And also spends a lot of his story trying to save people instead of proving himself through violence. And then we have Armin, the person chasing freedom with Eren. The difference between them is that Eren chooses his people against the world, dehumanizing everyone else. Armin never loses sight of other people's humanity. He keeps believing that understanding another person's point of view is worth fighting for, regardless of if diplomacy is impossible or not. Even though these characters are not perfect, they eventually stop allowing trauma to become their identity. They don't let their pain become the only thing that defines who they are. So what is Attack on Titan actually trying to say with this story? Well, it's a tale as old as time. It shows what happens when people fall into the cycle of propaganda, trauma, oppression, and what happens when it shapes who they are. It shows how these types of systems create villains who truly believe they're heroes, how victims are created, how those victims become oppressors, how oppression reshapes identity, and how every generation inherits the consequences of those that came before it. And I also think it's showing what happens when society teaches its children who they're supposed to hate. What kind of people are those children going to grow up to be, you know? Every society has a story it tells itself about who actually belongs and who doesn't, who deserves empathy and who deserves to be punished, blah, blah, blah. But somebody needs to be willing to stop the cycle instead of passing it on to the next generation. That's what it comes down to. Attack on Titan is a masterpiece, top to bottom. There's so many layers that draw you into the world and make you feel connected to the characters, man. I think anybody on this planet could see themselves in a character from this anime, whether it's emotionally or something you personally experienced, like losing a loved one or a friend. The concept of fear of the unknown, fear of what you've been taught being a lie, the fear of not knowing who you are. There's so much. And this is why Attack on Titan resonates with so many people and why, in my opinion, it's one of the best animes ever created, if not the best. Yeah, it's the best. Every generation inherits the pain of the one before it, but are we going to pass it on or let it end with us? That's the question I'll leave you with today. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. It's free and it helps the channel. Planning, scripting, and editing these videos takes a lot of late nights, so I appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to watch, because I understand you could be doing anything else with your time instead of listening to me. On another note, I think it'd be pretty cool to dive into some other animes that mirror life and help us look at things differently, but I don't know. We'll see. Thanks for watching.